The big headline from New Delhi comes from the British High Commission. It has lost extra security. Looks like India has had enough with the UK's tolerance of Khalistanis attacking Indians and its missions abroad. It could very well be a tale of two cities. Today in New Delhi, India removed all external security outside the British High Commission. Security was also reduced at the High Commissioner's residence. Cement barricades placed outside the UK mission and the envoy's house were removed. But if you're getting worried, fret not. India has not gone rogue. Security personnel are still posted outside the High Commission to safeguard both the mission and the British envoy, Alexander Ellis. It's something which Britain failed to do just a few days back, which brings us to the other city in the story, London. Let me refresh your memory first. On Monday, we told you about how Khalistani radicals attacked the Indian High Commission in London. Take a look at these images. Not only did the pro-Khalistani mob protest outside the London mission, they entered it and then pulled down the tricolour. It was an Indian staff member who intervened. He rescued our flag from the mob. And where was the British police? They failed to safeguard the mission. India lodged a strong protest with the Rishi Sunak government, which is sad that it's happening on the watch of an Indian origin British Prime Minister. We've always said there's no point cheering an Indian leader in a third country. Now imagine if the UK's mission in India was stormed in a similar fashion. Imagine the hue and cry that would have followed. The hypocrisy is staggering. Look at Britain's response to this incident. Its Foreign Office Minister Tariq Ahmed said, and I'm quoting, "The UK government will always take the security of the Indian High Commission seriously." Well, the statement is nothing but diplomatic platitude, and India is not having it. So today's action of reducing extra security outside the British High Commission could be seen as a tit-for-tat move. You see, it's the basic duty of the host nation to protect the foreign missions on its soil. And what exactly are these security measures? The Indian Ministry of External Affairs' protocol handbook lays out the following. 1. Government of India will implement all appropriate measures to protect the premises of foreign representations. 2. Appropriate precautionary measures will be taken in the likelihood of threat to their peace. And 3. Foreign representations are prohibited from taking unilateral security measures outside premises. Meaning, the barricades placed outside the UK mission were put there by the Government of India. And this additional security measure can be seen as a courtesy extended by the Modi government. They don't have to do it. It's a courtesy. And they don't have to do it, especially when the same is not afforded to the Indian mission in the UK. This is not an isolated incident. In December 2013, barricades outside the US Embassy in New Delhi were removed. This was following the Devyani Khobragade incident. She was an Indian diplomat, a deputy consul general in New York. She was strip-searched in the US. Why? They charged her with lying in her visa application about her domestic help. Khobragade was arrested and treated like a common criminal. As diplomatic ties became tense, India removed the security barricades outside the US mission in Delhi. Washington got the message. It tried to make amends. So you see, playing with security is a very dangerous game, and two can play it. In diplomacy, goodwill goes a long way, but it's a two-way street. So it's high time the UK shared its hypocrisy. If it expects India to go above and beyond to protect its missions, it must return the favor and not mouth platitudes while Khalistani vandals attack India. So the International Criminal Court has issued an arrest warrant against Vladimir Putin. It says Putin is committing war crimes in Ukraine. Fair enough. But what about the war crimes committed by Western countries over the years? Silence from the ICC on that front. Well, now the ICC has the opportunity to redeem itself. I'm sure you remember the war against ISIS, the one in which thousands of innocent civilians were killed. As it turns out, the United Kingdom killed many of those civilians. And the worst part is this: it denies all of them. It says it conducted precision strikes. Evidence shows they were way off the mark. Here's how London's lies have been exposed.
By 2015, a terror group called the Islamic State had become too big a threat to ignore. So the US launched Operation Inherent Resolve against ISIS. 30 countries were part of it, but the US and the UK led the charge. In less than a year, the world saw the Islamic State fall apart. It was a big victory. The US admitted that its campaign killed civilians too. The UK did not. It claimed to have fought a perfect war against ISIS, one in which no civilians were killed, at least by British forces. Now, an investigation by The Guardian and global war crime watchdog Air Wars has indicted Britain. The battle for Mosul was the hardest one fought after World War II. The Iraqi city was reduced to rubble. 11,000 civilians were killed in Mosul alone, both by ISIS and the Western-led coalition. Now, an investigation has identified at least 6 airstrikes in which several civilians were killed. And which country's missiles killed them? The United Kingdom's. A total of 43 British airstrikes are said to have caused civilian casualties. To say that these strikes merely killed civilians would not cover it. They destroyed entire families and ruined many lives. Lives of people like Imam Yunus, who was 31 at the time. She lost both her legs and her eldest daughter, who was just 6 years old then. Her 3-year-old daughter survived, but fragments of the missile tore into her stomach, and they're still in her skull. Yunus's son was a toddler when the missile struck. He lost part of his foot and hand. Yunus has not returned to Mosul since. She says, and I quote, "It's still impossible for me to think about going back to Mosul now. I didn't even visit my daughter's grave. I can't do it." But Britain remains defiant. It insists it did not kill any civilians. In response to the investigation, the UK's Ministry of Defence said, and I quote, "There is no evidence or indication that civilian casualties were caused by strikes in Syria and Iraq." British forces started bombing Iraq in 2014. A year later, they started pounding Syria. Between 2014 and 2020, the UK dropped 4,000 munitions on both countries. It claims these bombings killed over 3,000 terrorists, but not even one civilian. So either the UK has some military superpowers that make civilian casualties impossible, or it has been lying to the world. The latest investigation says London lied. The US, meanwhile, has said that the coalition bombings killed about 1,400 civilians, but it refused to identify the countries responsible for these deaths. By March 2019, the US, UK and their allies had conducted close to 35,000 strikes over Syria, Iraq and Libya. Will the International Criminal Court take this up? Forget prosecuting those responsible for civilian deaths, it is not even trying to confirm how many died. The worst part is this: the victims of British strikes cannot claim compensation. Even if London takes responsibility for civilian deaths, the victims won't get compensated. They passed a law in 2021 to ensure this. The law sets a 6-year limit on claims for damages. And that time period has lapsed for the victims of Operation Inherent Resolve. So, the onus is now on the International Criminal Court. But don't hold your breath for it to swing into action.
Our next story is about a growing terror threat. The Islamic State is attempting a revival, and on its target is Southeast Asia. The group has infiltrated into ASEAN nations. The focus is on 2 countries, Indonesia and the Philippines. We'll focus on Indonesia first. It will elect a new president next year. In the run-up to the polls, Indonesia's security challenges are rising. A new report says ISIS supporters have tied up with former terror convicts. They're trying to form a group, and they plan to launch attacks around election time. The targets too have been identified. They're looking at polling stations, the police and non-Muslims. And why are these the targets specifically? Because this group views them as enemies of ISIS. The report has not identified specific members involved in the terror plot, but it says one existing group poses a clear security challenge. It is called the Jemaah Anshaut Daulah, also known as JAD. And this group was formed in 2015. It was an umbrella organization for almost 24 extremist groups. These groups had pledged their allegiance to Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi. He was the leader of the ISIS. But more than 4 years ago, the ISIS collapsed. In 2019, al-Baghdadi was declared dead by the US. But the JAD is very much alive. Reports say its former and current members are active and they're believed to be plotting their next move. Also, the JAD is not the only one. Indonesia has at least one more ISIS affiliate. It is called the Mujahideen Indonesia Timur, or MIT. These groups, alongside other smaller affiliates, have conducted multiple attacks in the past. From 2016 to 2021, pro-ISIS groups carried out 13 attacks in Indonesia. They killed 68 people and injured more than 100. Now, these affiliates are getting active again, and this should not be surprising. The ISIS suffered a military defeat in 2018. Its so-called caliphate collapsed, but the group's widespread ideology was not erased. It has resurfaced. Smaller ISIS affiliates have sprung up, and they're much more radical in nature. One of the most prominent affiliates is the ISIS-K, the Islamic State Khorasan, the main challenger to the Taliban regime in Kabul. In 2021, it carried out the Kabul airport attack, a deadly suicide bombing that killed more than 180 people. The group benefited from the chaos created by America's hasty exit from Afghanistan. The Taliban have been unable to contain ISIS-K. It continues to target Taliban members. And now ASEAN countries face the risk of becoming the next hotspot. We've told you about Indonesia. The Philippines too faces this challenge. As recently as 2021, ISIS affiliates were active in this country. The main player is a group called ISIS East Asia. It was said to be recruiting and raising funds. And the internet plays a major role in all of this. ISIS members are active on leading platforms like Twitter, Facebook, Telegram and Instagram. And going by one claim, 90% of the ISIS recruitment happens via social media. Long story short, the ISIS is alive and active, and it now poses a bigger threat. Earlier, the war against the ISIS was limited to Syria and Iraq. Now its ideology has gone transnational. ISIS affiliates have spread from Africa to South Asia and now Southeast Asia. The danger is clear and present. It needs a united response from the global community.